In today's video, we have Alara, who I supported for her consulting interviews, and now she's at McKinsey. And I was very much impressed by your communication skills when we worked together. So thought you could be a great person today to discuss this. Welcome again.
Thank you. So if you want, I can give a brief background on myself. I am a business analyst at McKinsey. And before then, I worked in consulting again for about a year. And then before then, I graduated from Cornell and I studied applied economics and management there and then concentrated in finance.
We're going to get into the details in a second. See you there. Before I get into the theory behind what McKinsey and other MBB firms are looking for in evaluating candidates' communication and presence skills, first I want to get your experience on your McKinsey interviews. How did it feel like regarding portraying your communication and presence in the interviews?
So when McKinsey is usually interviewing candidates have to go through 5 separate interviews. The first 3 are usually with more managers, mid-level managers in the company, which we call them engagement managers. And then the last 2 are usually with partners. It could be an associate partner, even a managing director, or a normal partner. And during each interview, there's 2 main components. The first one is your personal experience part, which is more open-ended. They ask you a few questions and try to understand your general experience before with other work engagements, working in a team, maybe your abilities, which all I think flow down to, are you client presentable? And how you'd work within the team as a whole, if you can vibe with McKinsey culture. And then the second part is, of course, the case. So my experience has been pretty fun and relaxed, I'd say. It was very colloquial, or how would you say? It was very friendly of how they approached it. Basically, they just ask you a question like, can you tell me about a time you've worked with a team before? Or can you tell me about a time where something didn't go as planned? Or can you tell me about a time where you changed your manager's opinion on something? And then I just gave them a few of my experiences. In this section, I would strongly encourage people to focus equally as much on their presentableness, how they start their story, how they explain it, how they set it up, and not just on the events. Because at the end of the day, one of the key things about McKinsey is that the consultants, whether you're a business analyst or more senior, all are put in front of a client to present, and they just really want to make sure that you are able to communicate effectively.
Absolutely. And if you were to now start telling more about the subsets of this category, the first one is presence. You need to be able to display confidence. So as I said before, I was very much impressed by your skills on that regard, even if we haven't done many cases together. What advice would you have for people to display this in their case or fit interviews?
The main thing that helped me with this was to get into the consultant mindset, which is a little vague when I say it this way, but I like to think of it as consulting is sort of like acting. Which, please don't misunderstand me. I'm not saying go around and fake things, but when you talk to people, when you're presenting something, there's sort of like a skill set that goes along with it, which is, I think, similar to the skill set that actors would learn and portray. So when I was preparing for this, I liked to think that I was an actor and that I was given a script and I was expected to present it. And so that's how I could disassociate from maybe a bit of the stress of the moment. Like, oh, am I going to say it right? Am I going to fumble? Am I going to say something? And it was more so about, look, this is just step back. This is just a scene. You're just acting it. You have your script. You're just going to go along with the flow with it, which is what I think a lot of the times made it more natural. And also, I would highly encourage you to look excited, because I felt like this was like a little bit of like a scene in a movie or something like that. I'd be a little bit more enthusiastic, a little bit more smiley than I think I would have otherwise. The other thing is, when getting into the consultant mindset, I did 2 things, which is the first one is I read a bunch of books. Skim through them. I wouldn't recommend you to read like every single line there, but just to understand, what is consulting? What are you expected? What are the general topics that you're expected to cover? And then the second thing is podcasts. I would say that I think the Harvard Business Review has an excellent podcast called The Cold Call, and I would listen to them whenever I had the free time. They're very short, 30 minutes, but they are basically like consulting cases packed into like 30-minute clips. And you can quickly go through and learn about a bunch of different sectors. And one of the things that I think a lot of companies look at when they're interviewing you is your overall culturedness, your overall awareness of different things around the world. Because when you're working with cases, it can be anything. It can be you could be working in sectors that you have no idea about. So the ability to understand different components, I think, definitely gives you that confidence.
Absolutely. Also, the other thing I want to ask is, have you had your fit interviews conducted over video or was it in person?
My fits were over video, which is why I think I had to level up a little bit of the enthusiasm just to make sure that they got that.
And the reason why I'm asking is actually, I don't know if you want me to promote it, but you actually have your own YouTube channel. You've been doing this for a couple of years. Do you think that helped you?
I definitely think that helped me. That's actually a good point. So yeah, we could talk about that. So I have a YouTube channel where I talk about my life and a little bit about my college experiences, and we'll see maybe some consulting stuff in the future. But being able to talk to large masses and being able to communicate with different people gives you that confidence because you know how to talk on the spot and you just get those skills. And so it definitely did make it easier for me.
So far, we talked about presence. Now let's move to the second subset, which is precision. Try not to say the words of, and so on. I do fall into this trap myself too. You also need to make sure that in case and fit interviews, you don't want to ramble. And one of the best ways to get over that is that you need to rehearse a lot, you need to do a lot of case studies, and the tips you said earlier about building up confidence will also help you. And of course, as a great communicator yourself, what kind of tips and advice would you have besides the ones that we talked about on that?
I think before you go into conversations, whatever it might be, I would always create like a mental checklist. I would very quickly summarize the topics that needed to be addressed, starting with what did they ask for? Like, what is the point of this question? What are they actually trying to get from you? And then my story's main points, like what should I definitely highlight and make sure that I don't skip over? And then I would add like a few storylines in between, and then that's how I would usually communicate. So I have like the main point, which is what you want to wrap up with, and then the 4 or 3 main points that are going to deliver answers to that point.
It makes sense, but also I know that you were born and raised in the US, so it might have helped with your language. But for those who are not native speakers like myself, when I support my coaches during case and fit interview preparation, I always tell them the following. You don't need to be Shakespeare in your preparation. All you need is maybe 300, 400 words that are repeatedly used in interviews. There are a bunch of videos out there where you can find people talking about consulting and interviews. And second, just really accept the fact that you don't have to sound perfect. You just have to sound good enough. But if you have any other thoughts on this, would love to get that.
I definitely agree with those points, but I'd also like to add on that it's more about your confidence than your accent or your maybe grammar errors here and there. And I think over time, you'll be able to develop your language skills anyhow. It's more so they want to see that you have the passion and the ability to develop yourself.
For sure. Now, the third subset is active listening. You need to be able to listen to the verbal cues provided by the interviewers. Surely, sometimes you will see exhibits, you'll see some charts, but I would say 80% of the time, you'll actually hear data verbally. So you need to be able to respond to those little cues here and there. And the other aspect here is that sometimes as an interviewer, I do get frustrated when my sentences are cut. And I used to do that as well. I remember at BC, sometimes I would cut my partner's words and so on. I learned the hard way not to do that. Working with you was relatively easy. So do you have any recommendations or tips for the people watching that?
I actually will say ditto to that. I think the main thing that I'd like to emphasize in your point is respect. Because you are always, again, dealing with the client, they just want to see that you know when to speak and what to say. Cutting off people, not really listening and having to have the person repeat what they said. These are all terrible images in a client situation. So to be able to show them that you can first sit, then listen, and then synthesize what they said, and then only say the relevant points is very, very critical.
Many times I remember me or my colleagues would receive some tasks from their managers, and then they end up working on something wrong for half a day. That's also one of the reasons why I tell my trainees that when you're doing a case study, don't just pretend as if you understand the ask. Really dig deeper. I know sometimes you may not be able to impress the interviewer by clarifying things a couple of times, but it's very important that you show good listening skills. And I think that's a tip that not only you can apply in your interviews, but also in real life.
And to add on to that, in consulting, you're not expected to know everything. So your ability to work with the client or work with your colleagues is also very crucial. So your ability to clarify, like, in fact, I think it's worse that if you walk around pretending that you know something. From my experience with the interviews, I think they were pretty pleased if I clarified anything with them, like, okay, just to make sure that I understood this correctly. And then I'd give them like a little summary of where I'm up to so far.
It also shows interest, right?
Yeah, definitely. I think there's no need to like put pressure on this. I think if you actively look like you're interested, you're genuinely trying to solve the problem, and then you walk them through all the time, I think that was very, very important. Make sure that, you let them know where you are, especially in a remote environment where they can't see the paper, they can't see what you're doing. I think that's what made it more enjoyable and more successful for me.
For sure. Now, the last subset is relationship management. To me, this is one of those subjective evaluation criteria. You need to be able to show that you're a nice person to work with. Of course, you don't have hours and hours to show that, but surely first impressions count. And also not only from your side, but also from the interviewer side, you also need to, in a way, assess that person and whether that person is also good to work with. It is not always possible to form a chemistry between you as a candidate and the interviewer, but how would you overcome this? And what might be some tips and tricks perhaps for people to also tackle that issue?
So this is something that I actually actively thought about. In my opinion, probably what made me feel successful. I don't know if I was successful from their end, but when I would enter an interview, I'll admit I was stressed because you really want this opportunity, you're really going for it, and you've prepared so hard for it. But things can happen. Whenever I would be matched with someone, I would imagine that they were a family friend, that they were not some colleague that was trying to prevent me from entering the company, trying to find all my faults, but instead they were a family friend, maybe like my mom's friend or my aunt's friend.
Interesting.
And that they genuinely wanted me to be at the company. They were a little firm that they were going to tell you when you did it wrong. When I would open, for example, the interview, the video, I would just be like, almost like I've seen like a friend that I just haven't seen in a long time. Like, oh my God, hi. But not in that sense, but like, how are you? How's it going? And try to convey that, we're on the same page. And yes, you definitely will be interviewing me, but I'm also interviewing you because at the end of the day, I'm going to be spending hours at this company. And when you're working in consulting, you don't have cubicles. You just work in a big desk, and you can add to this. But in my situation, you'll go to a client, they'll give you a room, huge desk, and then you all just sit around their desk for 12 hours a day. So, you just really want to make sure that you're in there with the right people. And I think if you approach it with that, they're my friend, or maybe even I'd also think like they were alumni of like Cornell or something, then just, training me, mentoring me, it would definitely convey a little bit more relaxed.
Thanks a lot for sharing your perspectives today. I'm sure it's going to help a lot of people.
Thank you. Thank you guys, and good luck.